This is chapter 4 from my book, Paradoxical Wisdom, Just Be Kind, and it's the first part of chapter 4, and it has been edited, but I thought it might give a good summary of the inner congress, or the inner parts of the self. I know my own mind. This is the sound of naive, short-sighted, all-or-nothing, superficial, and non-introspective humanity. We normally consider our conscious mind to be the totality of our awareness. We cling to the disastrous illusion that we live in a simplistic and straightforward universe instead of the ultimately deceptive one that we do have. As is true in all fields of human endeavor, intelligent, learned, and dualistic minds disagree. Different schools of psychology describe the inherently split-up mind in different ways. The part of the mind of which we're largely unaware has been called the unconscious or subconscious mind, the lower self, the inner child, the id, the it, the other, the shadow, and so on. We actually don't know why the mind is normally split up into various parts. If psychological development goes well, a massive burying or repression of primitive thoughts and impulses occurs by the time the child is 7 or so. Before then, children's minds are predominantly unified and uninhibited. This is partly why they're so utterly charming. They freely say and do all those primitive, naive, aggressive, and sexual things we adults tend to keep under wraps and behind closed doors. This massive sweeping under the rug repression marks the separation of the unconscious mind from the conscious mind, or ego. This sets up a normal repressive barrier against an awareness of the more primitive and dark side of human nature. The growing child can thereby disown and put away confusing and uncivilized aspects of the self. He or she can be single-mindedly organized and focused on learning the many complex skills and concepts that are needed in any society. This is much more efficient. Repression accounts for the element of deception within the very makeup of our minds. It's a natural part of our cosmic nature. To some degree, we all deceive others and ourselves much of the time. This makes civilized society possible. Most importantly, we lie to ourselves. If we become unaware of our primitive and unbridled side, then we no longer have to be confused by so many conscious choices. We can simply and wholeheartedly proceed along more conventionally and socially constructive lines. The concrete, dualistic, black and white, pre-abstract and pre-paradoxical childhood mind thus attempts to disown the dark side of human nature. The child resorts to our favorite unconscious defense mechanisms of denial, repression, and projection. I'm all good, I am, the child thinks to him or herself, thus denying the presence of an inner evil and sordid side of human nature. The child's ego represses, the second mechanism, such aspects. That is, he or she keeps them under the rug and banishes them to a secret and hidden domain, to the unknown and out-of-sight depths of his own unconscious mind. Presto, now that's better. He's no longer confused or conflicted. The bad stuff disappears or gets explained away. Poof. No more distracting, confusing, delaying, and cumbersome decisions about what to do with these unsettling, contradictory, and confusing feelings, thoughts, and impulses. This is quite a relief. In addition, the child attempts to remain unaware of these upsetting inner aspects by detecting them only in others and not in himself. This is the third mechanism. This is projection. He or she becomes a veritable Rorschach projection machine, foisting the images of unwanted inner aspects onto others. While he views life through this distorting projectoscope, it's doubtful whether he can perceive an even remotely accurate picture of himself or objective reality. Instead, he uses this projectoscopic lens to focus on saving others from their dark sides. The child hones these new and self-blinding skills of denial, repression, and projection during childhood and adolescence, so that by his adult years, he's a master of self-deception. If this simplistic black or white get completely rid of the dark side, denial, repression, and projection could possibly work, this would be a sweetheart deal indeed. Nothing about the self goes away, however. Banished unconscious aspects wait and fester. From their perch within the deeply hidden and more or less unperceived recesses of the mind, they cause no end of mischief. Our every attempt to deny, disown, banish, project, or escape them only entraps us all the more. Thereby we inadvertently become our own most dreaded jail keepers. While the conscious mind or ego gradually matures with age, the repressed or unconscious parts of the self tend to remain fixated at various psychological ages that they were when they were first banished or repressed. This creates the havoc of various aged internal parts of the self which exist more or less unknown to each other and to the conscious mind. Each of these thinks in rather childish and concrete ways, each at his or her own appropriate and limited level of psychological development. Each has his own agenda, in contrast to the conscious mind and or to the other unconscious parts. And each is often immature and grandiose enough to think that he alone is the authentic and the whole self. This is the tragic flaw in the whole irrational and escapist process of deny and get rid of the bad parts strategy. The young child's attempt at a repressive, sweeping under the rug solution itself becomes the problem. Although it seems like a good idea at the time, it eventually results in the cacophony of competing, clashing, self-aggrandizing, ungovernable, center of the universe, and confusing identities, complexes, or part-selves, which are collectively known as the unconscious mind. These discarded and repressed unconscious infantile parts of the self continue to be wired into the brain's eventually conscious circuits. This takes place at a deeply and mostly unperceived level. Each of these I am the whole introjects of the unconscious competes with the others and with the conscious mind. Furthermore, while they're condemned to their hidden inner dungeons, it dawns on them that they can convert this very imprisoned obscurity into an advantage. They thus learn to capitalize on and utilize this invisibility to attain surprising degrees of stealthy power over their unaware and distracted conscious minds, or jail keepers. This allows the banished inner childlike part-selves to contribute to and exercise considerable and unnoticed influence on adult thoughts, feelings, attitudes, assumptions, energies, impulses, decisions, and actions. The inmates thus learn to at least partially run the prison. They become thereby irrepressible. Perched within their secret and unsupervised unconscious domains, they're now able to move efficiently and decisively. They can turn the tables and effectively direct the unwitting conscious mind to do their bidding, that is, to dance to the steps of their childish and impossible narratives or fantasies. They do this by installing secret and undetected hard drives, or malware, so to speak, with which they can commandeer the unaware conscious mind. From their deeply hidden and unperceived perch, the unconscious parts of the mind can interfere with and even commandeer the conscious self's more logical, balanced, realistic, and mature intentions and objectives. They whisper unperceived, powerful, and sometimes irresistible feelings and commands. These hard drives of stories or siren songs are usually perceived at a conscious level as fantasies. There are instances, however, when the unconscious mind abandons all such stealthy packaging and resorts instead to issuing blatant and audible commands to the conscious mind. We call these hallucinations. Fantasies drive us over many years to repeat uncanny, illogical, impulsive, and even extravagantly self-defeating behavioral patterns. These are called the repetition compulsion. The unconscious mind uses these to trick the conscious mind into implementing such repetitive themes as champion, failure, winner, loser, victim, peacemaker, and so on. Even worse, the unconscious inserts these themes into any life circumstance, regardless of fortunate or unfortunate specifics. Unconscious part-selves enjoy this secret control over this conscious and know-it-all adult self who understandably has his or her hands full with the task of managing life's normal deluge of distracting, challenging, and urgent external demands, and who's entrapped in the ever-ending, linear, and illusory distinctions between victory and defeat, pleasure and pain, right and wrong, hope and fear. The conscious mind thinks he's acting or reacting in case-specific ways. He fails to notice that he's dancing in harmony with an unperceived, controlling, and stereotyped repetition compulsion. In a way, the conscious mind thus unknowingly becomes the unconscious part-selves puppet or beast of burden. The conscious mind is left to explain and justify his or her uncanny, repetitive, irrational, confusing, and self-defeating behaviors to himself mostly, and also to others. He tries to explain and excuse his efforts by using rationalizations. The conscious self is thus a versatile, talented, and highly skilled spin doctor. These unperceived inner child part-selves use our own mistaken and dualistic logic to trick us to dance, like marionettes, to the tunes of their unheard siren songs or repetition compulsions. Think about it. Our unconscious and childlike part-selves can impose their feelings, thoughts, and agendas in virtual protection and secrecy hundreds of times a day without resistance or argument from the distracted, busy, overwhelmed, and preoccupied conscious mind. We humans instinctively put our best faces forward. We dress up and act in public as if we're totally logical, kindly, well-intentioned, harmless, and trustworthy. We pretend that we've got our acts together. Family members can attest, however, that they can see that otherwise, however, they can see us at home where we relax and let our defenses down. Keen observers of human nature read the unintended signs or tells of these unconscious and immature aspects of the self. These tells are the subtle hints, habits, tics, facial expressions, or slips of the tongue, which reveal those often contradictory aspects of ourselves that lurk behind our public masks. To the truly discerning eye, we're each on open display, we may as well be frank, especially with ourselves. Our every phrase, gesture, pose, action, or inaction gives us away. It turns out that we actually have nothing to hide in the first place. Our lower selves, or primitive ids, are identical. We each possess the seeds of the same, more or less repressed, negative, dark, and forbidden set of thoughts and impulses. My dark side can beat up your dark side. There's no need to feel embarrassed. The paradoxical trick is that we each must retrieve and disown this other half of we must retrieve and re-own this other half of ourselves if we're to unify and thus heal our split-up minds and come to the fullness and richness of integrated consciousness. We can then exercise astute judgment about how and if to manifest these aspects. In such a process, we can stop fooling ourselves with impossible and half-blind notions of perfection, purity, strength, and virtue. This process enriches us with much more energy, power, insight, happiness, and maneuverability. Thus, both repression and de-repression are needed in the midst of life's exquisitely balanced inner rhythm. There will be more to come. The next chapter elucidates this a lot more. Thank you.